Hey guys, it's Tim Miller at the Bulwark. I'm pumped to be here with Richard Rubin. This guy, I've been monitoring this guy and going to him for all of my tax questions for, I don't know, like 15 years now. Public policy tax questions,
Right.
that is. I
My
wish he
tax
gave me.
advice is worth what you're paying for it.
Yeah,
So
I wish you would give me pro bono tax advice, particularly coming into the next administration. I might be getting additional scrutiny. But unfortunately, I think your expertise is focused on the public tax policy. And so I was watching your Twitter thread as you were monitoring the Scott Bessent confirmation hearing yesterday. He's been nominated to be the Treasury Secretary. You know, we've been following Vote and Hegseth and Tulsi, all these other hearings, and so this one fell through the cracks. So I thought we'd bring you in and to get up to speed on what the big takeaways were from the incoming Secretary of Treasury.
yeah. So I think the takeaway, and first of all, it's Bessent rhymes with crescent.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What did I say? Bessent?
Bessent, not
Yeah,
Bessent.
Bessent. Scotty Bessent. There you go.
Bessent.
Okay.
And I think the takeaway is a little different on taxes. He is right in line with what any Republican president would have picked. So, this is the stuff he was saying during the hearing. We have a we have a spending problem, not a revenue problem. We shouldn't raise taxes on anyone. We should extend all the expiring tax cuts. All of that is like exactly what, to flashback for you, like what Mitt Romney's Treasury Secretary might have said if he had won. So, so in that respect, and that's true of the rest of the team that's coming in with him on tax policy. It's a pretty standard issue Republican team.
Really, like kind of like the deputies and stuff like that.
Yeah. The deputies, the National Economic Council staff, like the people who are coming into this administration are sound, like, long tenured Republican tax people. The IRS nominee aside, that's a separate issue. But the people who are going to run the policy. And then on tariffs, I think, he's, somewhere between Wall Street and Trump, right? So I think he's trying to bridge the gap between where, where the president-elect is, where Trump is, what he's talking about in terms of these really aggressive tariff moves, and trying to kind of soften a little bit the economic effect that might have. And, he's not backing away from them. He's defending them as a useful tool for raising revenue, for negotiating with other countries, but he doesn't sound like Trump when he's talking about them.
It's interesting let's focus on the tax side first, because the fact that he sounded like Mitt Romney's potential Treasury Secretary nominee is something that sounds nice to me, I guess, for the most part. But it is not really in step with the core MAGA message, right? The core message that Trump was pushing for. It's not that Trump ever pushed for tax hikes or anything like that, but there wasn't any couching, that there wasn't there wasn't a focus on the no tax on tips, et cetera, like some of these more populist tax gambits. The exchange with Raphael Warnock that I think the Democrats are going to make the most hay out of, where he specifically went through with him, do you want to extend the Trump tax cuts at he went through several different levels, and it got up to $1 billion, and Bessent is like, yeah, we want to extend the tax cut for $1 billion. That is a sticky wicket for them politically, I think. And it's something that Trump was a lot better at sort of eliding, the fact that his tax policy was quite friendly to the upper income levels. But, Bessent went straight at it, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, it was Warnock, I thought, did a very effective job of saying, okay, should we extend them at, what about if we extend them for everybody below 400,000? He said, no, you get and then he went to 1 million, 10 million, and 1 billion to sort of make him make that point.
Yeah.
And to be clear, Democrats don't all necessarily agree on the $400,000 figure.
Sure.
That was what, Biden and Harris ran on. We'll see what the future of tax policy looks like on their side. But yeah, I think he's, this is an administration that is coming in talking a lot about deficits, but they really view deficits as something to solve, not with taxes. They view deficits as something to be solved with economic growth and with spending cuts. And that's where he went. That's where he stayed. He gave basically no ground. He said, look, the extension of these expiring tax cuts is the most important issue, the most important economic issue facing the incoming administration, and we're going to push to get as much of it extended, all of it extended as possible.
Yeah, I think it's going to create political issues, much for you to cover on both sides, right? Because I think the Democrats obviously are going to make hay of it using the Warnock model. Then even on the Republican side, on the spending side, again, not that they want to talk about not extending certain levels of tax cuts, but at some level, the math is going to have to work on the deficit, or maybe it won't. But to get in the Chip Roys, the Thomas Masseys of the world, if you're already starting at what are we saying that this extension is going to cost?
4 to 5-ish.
4 to 5 trillion. Yeah, 4 to 5 trillion. Like, that's a big nut. And then you start to add in other stuff on top of that. Elon has already said that Doge, probably not going to get to the 2 trillion in cuts that he tossed out there. So it's going to just those extensions themselves. And I think that's really the first big thing, the first big test that they're going to face. But I thought it was pretty telling that there was not any sign of daylight on that from the administration.
Yeah, and the spending cuts are an important part. He was asked, I think Ben Ray Lujan from New Mexico asked him about Head Start. Would you want to cut Head Start? And he's like, well, I haven't really sort of thought through all the ins and outs of that program. And so, yeah, that's kind of one of the things that's going to come up. And I think it's also true that on the spectrum of things, Senate Republicans are much more on the side of extend the tax cuts and maybe not do so much on spending cuts, and particularly the Senate Republicans on the Finance Committee. And then it would be a very different picture if you were in front of House Ways and Means, or House Budget, or some of these other House groups. So, where they're really kind of trying to come up with these menus that you're starting to see circulate of spending cuts on Medicaid, Medicare providers, food stamps, like all these programs that some of them really want to see as a condition of extending the tax cuts. And that's a clash that's coming. It's something that Trump and Bessent will have to referee because they have such small margins in the House and Senate, and particularly in the House.
All right, now let's move over to the tariff side. You're going to have a new agency to start covering. It sounds like the External Revenue Service.
Yes, my great new colleague Gavin Bade is like our trade expert. So I see him in the room right in front of me. But
so we'll bring in Gavin for the ERS. New ERS
he's our
agency.
ERS guy. We don't know what the External Revenue Service is, but as was the case in the first Trump administration, the key thing is always to watch what they actually do. There's a lot of rumors. There's a lot of stuff being said. We're all used to that, or maybe we have to get our muscle memory back about that. But they'll say a bunch of things. There'll be lots of stuff happening. He'll say a bunch of things, and then when it comes time to actually issue executive orders, actually, pass laws, actually do all that, then enforce things, then we'll have a clearer picture of what he's actually saying versus doing.
Yeah, your colleague you mentioned, Gavin. They have a story out this morning about kind of these very pretty random old laws that they're looking into. They one example here, Section 232 of the Trade Act of 1974. There's a 1930s law that allows tariffs on nations that discriminate against U.S. firms. Watching the testimony yesterday, it's hard for me to get a sense for did Bessent seem to you they're going to do some of this stuff, or it's where on the scale from oh yeah, we're going to build the wall, and then you don't actually build 10 miles, all the way towards you expect some of these tariffs to come into place next week. What was your, obviously you can't, you don't have a crystal ball, but what was your sense for his demeanor talking about those types of issues?
That they're serious about it and they're making the case to defend them. He was, trying to argue why consumer prices wouldn't necessarily go up in the way that Democrats and economists expect. We'll see what happens. So I think they're definitely making the case to go there. They're starting to build the public argument to do it, and they will explore those authorities. That's the one advantage they've had over the past 4 years. They've had this period of time out of office where they can theoretically have thought about exactly how to use that. Where we are in Congress on trade is the Constitution gives Congress clear authority over trade. Over time, Congress has given that authority to the president to kind of manage tariffs and trade barriers. And now we're sort of at a stalemate in Congress. There's not enough power, particularly among Republicans who don't want to confront Trump, to claw back some of that authority. But there's also not necessarily a strong desire among Republicans to
fight him.
enact new tariffs and vote for them. And so
Right.
we'll be in the point where they've given him power and can't really take it back.
I thought maybe we'll be inviting Gavin in to discuss that next week. We'll see. We'll see how that shakes out. You had another story. You kind of alluded to it at the top. The IRS commissioner. There's an IRS commissioner, Danny Werfel, not the Florida quarterback.
Not Florida quarterback, different guy.
That is resigning, and it's like a Chris Wray situation, I guess, where his term was not expired, but he's going to resign because he expected to be fired. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, look. So his term doesn't go up until November of 27, and Congress set this intentionally so that to try and insulate the IRS from partisan politics. Last month, Trump said he would nominate as IRS Commissioner Billy Long, who's a former congressman from Missouri.
He's the guy that did the auctioneer, right? That's him. Yeah.
So not a tax guy, so it's like not a government management guy. So it's going to be a very different.
And a heavy poster. We see as a fellow poster, like you see him on Twitter X, popping off on things sometimes in strange ways from time to time.
It's going to be very different. And so Werfel basically said, look, I could stay, but we'd have this weird moment where I'm sitting there and like he's going up for confirmation and, I trust Werfel's basically, look, I trust the professional staff we've got at the IRS to manage this. I want to go back to your point too, that you started with, that which is a joke about being, you might get audited more in this second administration. It's something that we're watching, right? So when I asked Werfel about that, and he's like, look, I'm very confident that the guardrails in the system will hold, like inside the IRS, which has literally just two political appointees, the commissioner and the top lawyer, that people wouldn't follow orders to do that, and that the audit selection process is really insulated from political interference. So we'll watch that. But did he
give a sense for I assume did he consider waiting it out? There's sort of an argument for okay, if you want to fire me, all right? I don't know.
Yeah, no, there is, and that's not the choice he made. He said he thought it would be a distraction, basically, to have that going on. The IRS is entering its this filing season. You can start filing your individual tax returns. My tax advice for you: individual tax returns you can start filing on January 27th, and so that's really a critical period. And Werfel's point is look, we've got momentum in the changes that we've made with some of the money that Congress provided in 2022, and so let's just not be a distraction. Let's let the professional staff focus on that and building out that capacity as much as possible. We'll see. I don't have a clear sense of what to expect from Billy Long. He has not indicated at all what his posture is going to be like at the IRS.
All right. I want to say one nice thing about Scotty Bessent, not because I'm worried about being audited, but just because, we're straight shooters here. There was a nice exchange at the beginning about how he had tried multiple times to do public service before, including once when he was planning to be in the military, but was openly gay when he was younger. Mm-hmm. Openly gay, is married, adopted kid or kids? I forget. Two kids. Yeah. That is cool. It was nice. You could tell he felt very, kind of moved by that. And so, there's something to be said for the fact that he kind of overcame that and was like, look, I'm rolling back in. So I don't know. Was there any did that strike you? Was there anything else in the hearing? I obviously didn't watch the whole thing that struck you.
Yeah, that struck me just because, you and I have been around long enough to know that if that hearing had happened, 15, 18, 20 years ago, that would have been like the core of the hearing. It would have been like the idea that it was, his husband and their kids were sitting behind him is is in a Republican administration in particular is just unthinkable, even, not that long ago within our lifetime. So that but it wasn't no one asked him really, he brought it up in response to a question about his lack of public service experience. And he sort of explained, why. And so, it was the fact that it was so unremarked upon mostly, I think is what was notable about it. He, and he's likely to get confirmed. That's the other thing. We'll see how many Democratic votes he gets. But there's been no announced Republican opposition. I would expect it to happen not on the 20th, but probably in pretty short order within a few days.
All right. We're going to have a tax bill of some kind in 2025. So I do hope you'll come back and get me smart on it once we know a little bit more about the contours. Thanks for jumping on. It's Richard Rubin at the Wall Street Journal. You can see his reporting over there. We'll put the article on the IRS resignation and the Bessent hearing here in the notes. So appreciate everybody. Subscribe to the feed. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Richard.
Great. Thanks. Good to see you, Tim.